They say the wrong choice can destroy you, but sometimes the choice everyone says is wrong is the only one that matters. Tonight, you're about to witness a story of raw survival, forbidden power, and a bond forged in blood and fire. A healer no one wanted, a king no one could break, and the moment their worlds collided in the most dangerous way possible. Stick with me until the end. You won't believe where this goes. And if this story grabs you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's go. The forest had no mercy. Alira Vance knew that better than most. She'd learned it young, learned it hard, learned it in ways that left scars you couldn't see but never stopped feeling. Out here, in the bruised shadows where the pine trees grew so thick the sun barely touched ground, mercy was a myth. The forest took what it wanted. It didn't ask permission. And tonight, it was taking everything. The storm had come fast, the way storms did this close to the northern peaks. One moment, the sky was just gray and tired looking. The next, it was splitting open like something inside it had been waiting to break. Rain came down in sheets so thick Alira couldn't see past the edge of her porch. Wind screamed through the trees, bending them low, snapping branches like bones. She stood in the doorway of her cabin, arms crossed tight against the cold, and watched the world try to tear itself apart. This was the kind of storm that killed people. Travelers caught in the open, hunters too far from camp, idiots who thought they could outrun weather like this. Alira had seen what happened to bodies the forest gave back. She didn't plan on becoming one of them. She turned to go inside to bolt the door and wait it out by the fire, when she heard it. A sound. Low, guttural, barely human. She froze. For a second, she thought maybe she'd imagined it. The wind could play tricks, make you hear things that weren't there. But then it came again, closer this time. A groan. Heavy, pained. Something was out there. Alira's first instinct was to shut the door, lock it, pretend she hadn't heard a damn thing. That was the smart move. The safe move. The kind of move that kept you alive in a place like this. But her feet didn't move. She cursed under her breath, grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace, and stepped out into the rain. The storm hit her like a fist, cold, brutal, the kind of cold that sank straight into your bones and stayed there. She squinted through the downpour, boots sinking into mud, and scanned the tree line. Nothing. Just rain, just wind, just darkness. She was about to turn back when she saw it. A shape. Massive. Crumpled at the base of the old oak 20 feet from her door. Her breath caught. It was a man. No, not just a man. He was huge, even collapsed in the mud, even broken and bleeding. He looked like he could tear the world in half if he had the strength to stand. His shoulders were broad as an ox yoke. His arms were roped with muscle, streaked with blood and dirt. Dark hair plastered to his face. Clothes shredded. Breathing shallow. And he wasn't moving. Alira's grip tightened on the poker. She should have walked away. Should have gone back inside, locked the door, and let the forest take him. That's what anyone with sense would do. You didn't bring strangers into your home. Not out here. Not when you were alone. Not when you were a woman people already whispered about. But she didn't walk away. She moved closer, mud sucking at her boots, rain soaking through her cloak. She knelt beside him, pressed 2 fingers to his throat. A pulse. Faint. Unsteady. But there, he was alive. Barely. She pulled back his torn shirt and her stomach twisted. Deep gashes carved across his chest and ribs, claw marks. Something big had gotten him, something that wanted him dead. The wounds were infected. She could see it already. Fever hot, angry red. If she didn't do something, he'd be gone by morning. Alira sat back on her heels, rain dripping off her nose, and stared at him. This was a bad idea, the worst idea. The kind of idea that got people killed. But she was already reaching for him. She didn't know why, couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the healer in her, the part of her that couldn't watch something suffer and do nothing. Maybe it was something else, something deeper, something that looked at this broken, bleeding stranger and saw something. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. He was dead weight, heavy as stone. Her boots slipped in the mud. Her muscles screamed. But she gritted her teeth and dragged him inch by inch toward the cabin. By the time she got him inside, she was shaking, soaked, out of breath. She kicked the door shut behind her, bolted it, and let him drop onto the floor by the fireplace. For a long moment, she just stood there, dripping rainwater, staring down at him. "What the hell did I just do?" she muttered. The fire crackled. The storm raged outside, and the stranger lay bleeding on her floor, unconscious and silent. Alira wiped the rain from her face and got to work. She'd been a healer for as long as she could remember, not by choice, not because she wanted to be special or different or gifted. The way people said it with that edge in their voice, like the word tasted wrong. She was a healer because that's what she was. The way some people were born, tall or quick or mean, it was just there, in her blood, in her bones. Her grandmother had been the same, and her mother, and probably every woman in her line going back further than anyone remembered. The gift ran deep, ran true, and it made people uneasy. Alira had learned young that uneasy people were dangerous people. She'd grown up in a settlement 2 days south of here, a hard place, a place where people worked themselves to the bone just to survive and didn't have patience for anything that didn't make sense. Her gift didn't make sense. She could touch someone, skin to skin, and feel what was wrong inside them. Infections, fevers, broken bones, poison. It didn't matter. She could sense it, and most of the time she could fix it. But people didn't like that. They didn't like that a scrawny girl could do what their medicines couldn't. Didn't like that she could pull someone back from the edge of death when prayers and poultices failed. Didn't like that she was quiet and strange and didn't explain herself. So they called her a witch. They called her cursed. They called her dangerous. And when a fever swept through the settlement one winter and half the children died despite everything she did, they called her worse than that. She'd left before they could decide whether burning her was worth the effort. That was 6 years ago. She'd been alone ever since, and she'd learned to be fine with it. Out here, in the deep woods where no one came looking, she didn't have to explain herself, didn't have to pretend, didn't have to watch people look at her like she was something unclean. She had her cabin, her garden, her quiet. It was enough. Or it had been. Until tonight. Alira knelt beside the stranger, scissors in hand, and cut away the ruined fabric of his shirt. The wounds were worse than she'd thought. 4 deep slashes across his ribs, another across his shoulder. Something with claws had tried to gut him. Whatever it was, it had come damn close to succeeding. The edges of the cuts were ragged, dirt and debris packed into the tissue. Infection already setting in. She pressed her palm flat against his chest. Heat. Too much heat. Fever burning through him like wildfire. She closed her eyes and let the gift do what it did. It wasn't magic. She didn't have words for it. It was more like listening, like pressing your ear to a door and hearing what was happening on the other side. She could feel the infection spreading through him, could feel his body trying to fight it and losing, could feel the fever pulling him down, deeper and deeper, toward a place he wouldn't come back from. She pulled her hand away and exhaled slowly. He was dying. Not tomorrow. Not in a week. Soon, unless she did something about it. Alira stood, moved to the shelves along the wall, and started pulling down jars. Yarrow, comfrey root, golden seal, willow bark. She ground the herbs with quick, practiced motions, mixed them into a paste, and brought it back to the fire. She cleaned the wounds first. Water, salt, a cloth she'd boiled that morning. He didn't wake, didn't flinch, just lay there, barely breathing while she worked. When the wounds were clean, she spread the paste over them, thick and green and bitter-smelling. Then she wrapped his torso in strips of linen, tight enough to hold but not so tight he couldn't breathe. By the time she finished, her hands were shaking. She sat back, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and looked at him. In the firelight, he didn't look quite so monstrous. Still big, still dangerous looking, but there was something almost human about him now. The hard lines of his face, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way his jaw was clenched even in unconsciousness, like he was still fighting something. Alira frowned. Who the hell was he? And what had he been running from? She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the fire, knees pulled to her chest, and watched him breathe. The storm raged outside. Wind howled, rain hammered the roof, but inside it was quiet, just the crackle of the fire and the slow, shallow rhythm of his breathing. Hours passed. The fever didn't break. Elira changed the bandages twice, reapplied the paste, pressed her palm to his chest again and again, trying to pull the infection out, trying to drag him back from the edge. It wasn't working, or it was working too slowly. She could feel him slipping, could feel his body shutting down piece by piece. If this kept up, he'd be gone by dawn. She clenched her jaw. "No," she said aloud. "Not tonight." She didn't know why she cared, didn't know why this stranger mattered, but he did. Maybe because she'd already saved him once, maybe because she was tired of losing, maybe because something about him, something she couldn't name, made her want to fight. So she did. She placed both hands flat on his chest, closed her eyes, and pushed. It wasn't something she did often. It cost too much. Took too much out of her. But she didn't have a choice. She felt the infection like a living thing inside him, dark, spreading, poisonous. She wrapped her will around it, pulled it toward her, dragged it out of him and into herself. Pain hit her like a hammer. She gasped. Her vision blurred. Her hand shook, but she didn't stop. She pulled harder. The infection fought back. It burned. It clawed. It tried to dig in and stay. But she was stronger. She had to be stronger. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, it came loose. She felt it leave him, felt it sink into her instead. Her chest tightened. Her breath came short. Fever spiked through her veins, but his breathing evened out. The heat in his skin faded. The worst of it was gone. Elira pulled her hands away and collapsed backward onto the floor, gasping for air. Her whole body ached, her head pounded. The infection sat inside her now, burning low in her gut, but it wouldn't kill her. She was used to this. Her body knew how to break it down, process it, survive it. She'd be fine. He'd be fine. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her. When she woke, the fire had burned down to embers, and pale gray light was bleeding through the cracks in the shutters. Morning. She sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her back, and looked toward the stranger. He was still unconscious, but his breathing was steady now, deep, even. The fever was gone. Elira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He was going to live. She stood, stretched, and moved to the window. Outside, the storm had passed. The forest was quiet again, wet, dripping, but calm. She turned back to look at him. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. The sheer size of him. The scars that covered his arms and chest, old wounds, layered on top of each other, the kind you only got from a lifetime of fighting. The way his hands were calloused and scarred, knuckles thick and broken. This wasn't some traveler who'd gotten lost. This was a warrior. And not just any warrior. Elira's gaze moved to the symbol burned into the leather bracer on his wrist. A wolf's head, snarling, surrounded by jagged mountains. Her stomach dropped. She knew that symbol. Everyone knew that symbol. It was the mark of the Northern Highlands, the mark of the mountain kingdoms, the mark of... "No," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew. The stranger lying on her floor wasn't just a warrior. He was the warrior. Kyle Draven, the Alpha King, the man they called the Wolf of the North, the most feared, most brutal, most dangerous ruler in the entire frontier. And she'd just saved his life. Elira backed away from him slowly, her heart pounding. This was bad. This was so bad. If anyone found out he was here, if his enemies found out, if his guards found out, if anyone found out, she was dead. They'd burn her cabin to the ground. They'd call her a traitor, a conspirator, a threat, and they wouldn't be wrong. She should have let him die. She should have dragged him back out into the rain and let the forest take him. But she hadn't. And now he was here, alive, breathing, in her cabin. "What have I done?" she whispered. Behind her, the stranger, the king, stirred. His eyes opened, and they locked on her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elira stood frozen by the window, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He was between her and the door. Kyle Draven didn't sit up, didn't speak, just watched her with eyes that were sharp and cold and impossibly dark. Wolf's eyes. She'd heard the stories, everyone had. They said he could kill a man with his bare hands, that he'd united the mountain clans through blood and fire. That he didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't show mercy. They said he was more animal than man. Looking at him now, she believed it. "You're awake," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He didn't answer, just kept watching her, weighing her, like he was deciding whether she was a threat. The silence stretched. Alira forced herself to take a breath, to think. She'd dealt with dangerous people before. She'd survived worse than this. Probably. "You were dying," she said. "I brought you inside, treated your wounds. You're welcome, by the way." Still nothing. She crossed her arms. "If you're planning to kill me, at least wait until you can stand. I didn't drag you through a storm just to watch you bleed out on my floor after I saved you." That got a reaction. One corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "You talk a lot," he said. His voice was rough, low, the kind of voice that made the air feel heavier. Alira shrugged. "Yeah, well, I don't get a lot of visitors." "I can see why." She raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You live in the middle of nowhere, alone. In a forest most people are smart enough to avoid." He shifted slightly, winced, and glanced down at the bandages wrapped around his torso. "Either you're running from something or you're crazy. Or maybe I just don't like people." "That too." He tried to sit up, his jaw tightened. Pain flashed across his face, but he didn't stop. He pushed himself upright, slowly, muscles straining, and leaned back against the wall. Alira watched him, half impressed, half annoyed. "You should be resting," she said. "I've rested enough." "You've been unconscious for 12 hours. That's not the same thing." "Close enough." She sighed. "You're stubborn. And you're bossy." "It's my cabin. I'll be as bossy as I want." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he almost smiled. "Fair." Alira relaxed slightly. Just slightly. He wasn't trying to kill her. That was something. She moved to the table, poured water into a cup, and brought it to him. "Drink." He took it without argument, drained it in 3 swallows, and handed it back. "Thank you," he said quietly. She blinked. She hadn't expected that. "You're welcome." Another silence. This one less sharp, less dangerous. Kyle studied her, his gaze moving over her face, her hands, the way she held herself, like he was trying to figure her out. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Giving her name felt like giving something away, something she wasn't sure she wanted him to have, but lying felt worse. "Alira," she said. "Alira Vance." "Vance?" he repeated. "I've heard that name before." Her stomach tightened. "I doubt it." "No, I have." His eyes narrowed. "There was a healer, down south, years ago. They said she was gifted, dangerous. They ran her out." Alira's throat went dry. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Kale's expression shifted. Not pity, not disgust, just understanding. "That was you," he said. It wasn't a question. She met his gaze, held it. "Yeah, that was me." He nodded slowly. "And you saved me anyway. I didn't know who you were." Would it have mattered? She thought about that, about all the stories she'd heard, about the blood on his hands, about the kingdoms he'd crushed. "I don't know," she said honestly. He smiled. A real smile this time, small, tired, but real. "I like you, Alira Vance." She snorted. "Don't get used to it." He stayed. Not because she asked him to, not because he wanted to, because he couldn't leave. The wounds were healing, but they weren't healed. He could stand now. Walk. But not far. Not fast. And out there, in the forest, with enemies hunting him, he'd be dead in a day. So he stayed, and Alira let him. She told herself it was practical. He needed time to recover. She needed to make sure the infection didn't come back. That was all. But that wasn't all. There was something else, something she didn't have words for. A pull. A weight. Like the air between them was charged with something she couldn't see but could feel every time they were in the same room. It made her uneasy. It made her curious. She hated it. The first few days were tense. They moved around each other carefully, like two animals sharing a den, neither one sure if the other was going to bite. Kael didn't talk much. He watched, listened, took in everything. Alira kept herself busy, tending the fire, cooking, checking his wounds, anything to avoid the strange, heavy silence that filled the cabin whenever they were both still. But on the third night, something shifted. She was sitting by the fire, stitching a tear in her cloak when he spoke. "Why do you live out here alone?" She didn't look up. "I told you, I don't like people." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "They hurt you." Her hand stilled. "People," he continued, "they hurt you. That's why you left." She set the cloak aside and finally looked at him. He was watching her, not with pity, not with judgment, just seeing her. "They didn't hurt me," she said quietly. "They were afraid of me. There's a difference." "Is there?" She didn't answer. Kael leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "I've been feared my whole life, Alira. I know what it costs." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. "Then you know why I'm here," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, I do." And for the first time since he'd woken up in her cabin, she didn't feel alone. The days blurred together after that. Kael grew stronger. The wounds closed. The fever stayed gone. He started moving around the cabin more, helping where he could, chopping wood, hauling water, fixing the broken shutters she'd been meaning to repair for months. He didn't ask permission, just did it. Alira didn't stop him. They fell into a rhythm, a strange, unexpected routine. She cooked, he ate, she worked on her herbs, he sharpened his blade. They talked, not much, but enough. She learned things about him, small things, the way he hated being still, the way he always sat with his back to the wall, the way he watched the forest like he expected it to attack. He learned things about her too, the way she hummed when she was working, the way she flinched when he moved too fast, the way she never quite relaxed. It was almost comfortable. Almost. But there was still that weight between them, that pull. It grew stronger every day. Alira tried to ignore it, tried to focus on anything else. But it was there, constant, undeniable. And she knew he felt it too. She could see it in the way he looked at her sometimes, the way his gaze lingered a little too long, the way his voice went quiet when he said her name. It terrified her, because she knew what happened when you let someone in. They left. They always left. And she couldn't survive that again. On the 10th night, the tension finally broke. They were sitting by the fire, the cabin warm and quiet, when Kael spoke. "I have to leave soon." Alira's chest tightened, but she didn't let it show. "I know. My people will be looking for me. They'll find this place eventually." "I know." He looked at her. "You should come with me." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Come with me," he said again. "Back to the highlands." She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Are you insane?" "No." "You want me, an outcast, a witch, someone people fear, to walk into a royal court full of people who would gut me the second they saw me?" "Yes." "Why?" He stood, crossed the small space between them, and crouched in front of her so they were eye to eye. "Because you saved my life," he said. "Because you're stronger than you think. Because I don't want to leave you here alone." Her breath caught. "Kael, and because I've spent 10 days watching you, Alira Vance, and I've never met anyone like you. You're sharp, you're stubborn, you're fearless, and you don't bow to anyone." His gaze held hers. "That's exactly the kind of person I need." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough. Your court will hate me." "They'll hate you at first," he admitted. "But you'll prove them wrong. You always do." She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him to leave and never come back, wanted to protect herself the way she always had. But when she looked into his eyes, those sharp, dangerous, impossibly human eyes, she couldn't. "This is a terrible idea," she said. He smiled. "Probably. I'm going to regret this." "Maybe," She closed her eyes, took a breath, and made the choice that would change everything. "Fine," she said. "I'll come." They left at dawn. Kyle's guards found them 3 days later, just past the ridge where the forest thinned and the mountains began their brutal climb toward the sky. Alira heard them before she saw them. The thunder of hooves, the clank of armor, the low voices of men who'd been searching too long and found too little. She froze. Kyle didn't. He stepped in front of her, one arm out like a barrier, and watched the tree line with the same cold focus she'd seen that first night in her cabin. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "I'm not a child." "I know, but they don't." Before she could argue, the riders broke through the trees. There were 12 of them, big men, hard men, the kind who looked like they'd been carved out of stone and left to weather in the rain. They wore dark leather and steel, wolves etched into their chest plates, swords strapped to their backs. Their horses were massive, war-bred, scarred, mean-looking. The lead rider pulled up short when he saw Kyle. His face went slack with shock, then relief, then something that looked almost like anger. "My king," he said, swinging down from his saddle. He was older than the others, gray streaking through his beard, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. "We've been searching for 2 weeks. We thought—" "I'm alive, Garen," Kyle said. "That's all that matters." Garen's gaze flicked to Alira. His expression hardened. "Who is she?" Alira lifted her chin. She'd dealt with men like this before. Men who looked at her like she was something that didn't belong. Something that needed to be dealt with. "Someone who saved my life," Kale said before she could answer. Garen's eyes narrowed. "She's a healer?" "Yes." "From where?" "Does it matter?" "It does if she's a threat." Kale's voice went cold. "She's not." The tension in the air sharpened. The other guards shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward their weapons. Alira's pulse kicked up, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. She'd learned a long time ago that showing fear was the fastest way to get torn apart. Garen stared at Kyle for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "As you say, my king." But his gaze stayed on Alira, and it wasn't friendly. Kale turned to her. "Can you ride?" She blinked. "What?" "A horse. Can you ride one?" Yes, sort of." He almost smiled. "Good enough." One of the younger guards brought a horse forward, a gray mare, smaller than the war horses but still intimidating as hell. Alira eyed it warily. "I haven't ridden in years," she muttered. "You'll remember," Kale said. She shot him a look. "You're very confident for someone who almost died in my front yard. And you're very mouthy for someone about to walk into a den of wolves. I thought you said I'd be fine. I said you'd survive. I didn't say it'd be easy." She sighed, grabbed the reins, and hauled herself into the saddle. The horse shifted beneath her, and she tightened her grip. Kyle swung onto his own mount, a black beast that looked like it could kick through a stone wall, and nodded to Garen. "We ride for the fortress. No stops." Garen hesitated. "My king, you're still injured. I'm fine. The healers should—" "I said I'm fine." Kale's tone left no room for argument. Garen's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He just turned his horse and barked orders at the others. As the group started moving, Alira glanced at Kyle. "You didn't tell them I healed you," she said quietly. "No." "Why not?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because they don't need to know. Not yet." She didn't like the sound of that. But before she could ask what he meant, the horse jolted forward, and she had to focus on not falling off. The ride took 2 days. 2 brutal, exhausting days of climbing narrow mountain trails, fording icy rivers, and sleeping on frozen ground with nothing but a thin blanket and the distant howl of wolves for company. Alira had forgotten how much she hated traveling. The guards didn't speak to her, didn't look at her, just kept their distance like she was carrying a plague. Garen was the worst. He watched her constantly, his expression somewhere between suspicion and outright hostility. Kale noticed. He didn't say anything, but she saw the way his jaw tightened every time Garen's gaze lingered too long. On the second night, when the others had settled around the fire and Alira was sitting apart from the group, Kael came and sat beside her. "They'll warm up," he said. "No, they won't." "Give them time," she snorted. "Time won't fix the fact that I'm an outsider, a stranger, someone who doesn't belong. You belong because I say you belong. That's not how it works." It is in my kingdom." She looked at him, really looked at him. In the firelight, he looked tired, older, like the weight of the crown he carried was something he could never quite put down. "You really believe that, don't you?" she said. "I have to." "Why?" He didn't answer right away, just stared into the fire, his expression distant. "Because if I don't," he said finally, "everything I've built falls apart." There was something raw in his voice, something that made her chest ache. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him it would be okay, but she didn't believe in lies, so she just sat with him in the silence, and that seemed like enough. The fortress appeared on the third morning. Alira saw it from miles away, a massive stone structure carved into the side of the mountain, dark and jagged and brutal. It didn't look like a palace, it looked like a weapon. Towers jutted up like blades, walls thick enough to stop an army, narrow windows that looked more like arrow slits than anything meant to let in light. It was the kind of place that was built to survive, to endure, to never fall. And Alira was supposed to walk into it like she belonged there. Her stomach twisted. As they rode closer, she saw people, hundreds of them, workers, guards, servants. They lined the walls, the courtyards, the gates, all of them watching, all of them silent. Word had already spread. The king was back, and he wasn't alone. Alira felt the weight of their stares like a physical thing, heavy, crushing. She forced herself to sit straighter in the saddle, to keep her expression neutral, to not let them see how badly she wanted to turn around and run. Kael rode ahead, his posture easy, confident, like he owned the world and knew it. When they passed through the gates, the guards snapped to attention. People bowed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. But their eyes stayed on Alira. She could feel the questions, the suspicion, the judgment. Who is she? Why is she here? What does the king want with her? Garen dismounted first, barking orders, sending guards scattering. Kael swung down from his horse and turned to Alira. "Come on," he said. She slid off the mare, her legs unsteady, and followed him into the fortress. Inside, it was colder than she'd expected. The stone walls trapped the chill, and the narrow corridors felt like they were closing in. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting flickering shadows that made everything look sharper, harder. Kael led her through a maze of hallways, up a spiral staircase, and into a large room with a fireplace, a bed, and a window that looked out over the mountains. "This is yours," he said. Alira blinked. "What?" "Your room. You'll stay here." She looked around. It was bigger than her entire cabin, nicer too. A thick rug on the floor, clean linens on the bed, a table and chairs by the window. "This is too much," she said. "It's the smallest guest room we have." "Kael, you're under my protection, Alira. That means you're treated with respect." His gaze hardened. "Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was a mistake, but the look on his face stopped her. He wasn't asking, he was telling, and she had a feeling that in this place, what the king said was law. "Fine," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. "I'll send someone with food. Rest. You'll need it." "Why? What's happening?" "Tomorrow I'm presenting you to the court." Her stomach dropped. "Already?" "The longer we wait, the worse it'll be. They need to see you. Need to know you're not a threat. And if they decide I am?" His expression went cold. "Then they'll learn what happens when they question me." Before she could respond, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. Alira stood alone in the too-big room, her heart pounding, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The next morning came too fast. Alira barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined walking into that court. Imagined the stares, the whispers, the inevitable moment when someone decided she didn't belong and tried to do something about it. By the time a servant knocked on her door, her nerves were frayed to nothing. The servant was a young woman, maybe 16, with dark hair and wary eyes. She didn't speak, just handed Elira a dress, deep green, simple but well made, and waited. Elira stared at it. "I don't wear dresses." The king requested it. Of course he did. She changed quickly, feeling awkward and exposed. The dress fit well enough, but it wasn't her. It felt like a costume, like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. When she stepped out into the hallway, 2 guards were waiting. They didn't speak either, just fell into step behind her as she followed the servant through the fortress. The great hall was massive, high ceilings, stone columns, banners hanging from the walls, each one bearing the wolf sigil. At the far end, a raised platform with a throne, black iron, unadorned, intimidating, and surrounding it, the court. Nobles, advisors, warriors, all of them dressed in fine clothes, all of them watching her with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Elira's throat went dry. Kael stood at the front near the throne, talking to a man in dark robes. When he saw her, he straightened. "Elira," he said. His voice carried across the hall. "Come forward." She forced her legs to move, forced herself to walk across that stone floor with every eye on her. When she reached the platform, she stopped. Kael stepped down to stand beside her. "This is Elira Vance, Gis," he said, his voice loud and clear. "She saved my life. She is under my protection. She will be treated with the respect that demands." The hall erupted. Voices overlapped. Questions, protests. A tall man near the front, broad-shouldered, richly dressed with a sharp, cruel face, stepped forward. "My king," he said smoothly, "with all respect, we know nothing about this woman, her family, her loyalties, her intentions." Kael's gaze went cold. "I know all I need to know, Lord Corwin. And what if she's a spy, a plant sent by our enemies?" "She's not." "How can you be sure?" "Because I trust her." Corwin's smile was thin. "Trust is a dangerous thing, my king, especially when it's misplaced." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elira could feel the shift, the doubt, the suspicion. She clenched her fists. Kael stepped forward, and the room went silent. "I will say this once," he said, his voice low and deadly. "Elira Vance is here because I brought her here. She stays because I want her to stay. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. Now." No one moved. Corwin's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. "Of course, my king." Kael turned to Elira. "Ignore them." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. He almost smiled. "You'll get used to it." She doubted that. The days that followed were a nightmare. Everywhere Elira went, people stared, whispered, judged. The servants avoided her. The guards watched her like she might pull a knife at any second. The nobles were worse, all fake smiles and sharp words testing her, trying to find a weakness. Corwin was the worst of them. He cornered her one afternoon in the library, his smile polite, his eyes cold. "Miss Vance," he said, "I hope you're settling in." "I'm fine. I'm sure the king has been very accommodating." She didn't like his tone. "Is there something you want, Lord Corwin?" "Just to offer some advice." He leaned closer. "This court is not kind to outsiders. If you're smart, you'll leave before you get hurt." "Is that a threat?" "A warning. I'll keep that in mind." He smiled. "I hope you do." That night, Elira told Kael what happened. He went very still. "What did he say exactly?" "That I should leave before I get hurt." Kael's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it." "How?" "You don't need to worry about that." "Kael, I said I'll handle it." His tone left no room for argument, but Elira couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get worse. Well, she was right. A week later, the sickness started. It began with the servants. A fever, a cough. Nothing serious at first. But it spread. Fast. Within days, half the household was bedridden. Then the guards, then the nobles. The fortress descended into chaos. Healers were brought in, but they couldn't stop it. The fever got worse. People started dying, and someone started a rumor. It was the outsider's fault, the witch, Elira. She heard the whispers, saw the way people looked at her, like she'd brought the plague with her, like she was the reason their loved ones were dying. Kael tried to shut it down, tried to tell them it wasn't her, but the fear had already taken root, and fear made people dangerous. One night, Alira was walking back to her room when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. 3 men, guards, their faces hard. "You need to leave," one of them said. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Pack your things and go, before more people die." Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I didn't cause this. That's not what people are saying. People are wrong." The guard stepped closer. "Leave, or we'll make you." She should have run, should have called for help, but something in her snapped. "No." His eyes narrowed. "What?" "I said no. I'm not leaving. I'm going to fix this." "You can't. Watch me." And before they could stop her, she turned and walked away. She went straight to the infirmary. It was packed, bodies on every bed, people moaning, coughing, dying. The healers looked exhausted, overwhelmed. Alira rolled up her sleeves. "What are you doing?" one of the healers asked. "Helping." "You're not?" "I'm a healer, and right now you need all the help you can get." The woman stared at her. Then slowly, she nodded. Alira moved through the room, checking pulses, examining symptoms, mixing herbs. The fever was aggressive, relentless, but it had a pattern, a rhythm. And she'd seen something like it before. It wasn't a plague. It was poisoning. Someone had contaminated the water supply, she told Kael that night. His face went dark. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Who?" "I don't know, but whoever it is, they wanted people to blame me." His hands clenched into fists. "I'll find them." "Kael?" "I'll find them, Alira, and when I do, they'll wish they'd never been born." She believed him, but first, they had to save the people who were still alive. Alira worked through the night, through the next day, through the day after that. She barely slept, barely ate, just moved from patient to patient, pulling the poison out, healing what she could, saving as many as she would. People started to notice. The whispers changed. "She's saving them. She's not the witch. She's the cure." Slowly the tide turned, but not everyone was convinced. Corwin came to see her on the 3rd day. "Impressive work, Miss Vance," he said. She didn't look up. "What do you want?" "To congratulate you. You've won the people over. For now." "For now?" "Nothing lasts forever." He smiled. "Enjoy it while you can." And then he was gone. Alira's hands shook. She knew what he was saying. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When the last patient recovered, the fortress erupted in celebration. People who'd cursed her name days before now thanked her, bowed to her, called her a hero. It felt hollow. Kael found her that night, standing on the balcony outside her room, staring out at the mountains. "You did it," he said. "I did what I had to. You saved them. Some of them. Not all." He stepped beside her. "You can't save everyone, Alira." "I know." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Kael spoke. "I found out who poisoned the water." Her head snapped toward him. "Who?" His expression was grim. "One of Corwin's men. A servant. He confessed." "And Corwin?" "Claims he had nothing to do with it. Says the man acted alone." "You believe that?" "No." "Then what are you going to do?" Kael's gaze went cold. "What I always do. What I have to." She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't want to know. But that night, Corwin disappeared, and no one ever saw him again. The fortress felt different after Corwin vanished. Quieter, colder. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Alira felt it most in the way people looked at her now. Not with open hostility that had faded after she'd saved half the court from poisoning, but there was something else in their eyes. Something harder to name. Wariness, maybe. Or calculation, like they were trying to figure out what she was worth, what she could do for them, what threat she posed. She hated it. She'd gone from outcast to curiosity to something she couldn't quite define, and none of it felt real. None of it felt safe. Kyle had been distant since Corwin disappeared. Not cold, just occupied. He spent his days locked in meetings with advisors, his nights pacing the halls or standing on the battlements staring out at the dark mountains like he was waiting for something to come crawling out of them. Elira saw him less and less, and when she did see him, there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before, a tightness around his eyes, like he was carrying a weight that was starting to crush him. She wanted to ask him about it, wanted to demand answers, but every time she tried, something stopped her. Maybe it was the look on his face. Maybe it was the guards who always seemed to be watching. Maybe it was the fact that she was still an outsider here, no matter how many people she saved. So she kept her mouth shut and tried to stay out of the way. It didn't work. 3 weeks after Corwin disappeared, everything changed. It started with a messenger. Elira was in the infirmary. She'd been spending most of her time there, helping the remaining healers, keeping herself busy, when the doors slammed open and a man stumbled in. He was young, maybe 20, covered in mud and blood, his face pale with exhaustion. "The king!" he gasped. "I need to see the king." One of the healers moved toward him. "You're injured. I don't care. Get the king, now." Elira stepped forward. What happened? The messenger's eyes locked on her. For a second, he looked confused. Then his expression hardened. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help. Talk." He hesitated. Then, like the words were being dragged out of him, "The eastern border. We're under attack." Her stomach dropped. "Attack? By who?" "Warlord Theron. He's moving on the highlands. He's got an army, thousands of men. They've already taken 2 settlements, burned them to the ground." The room went silent. Elira's pulse kicked up. "How long do we have?" "A week, maybe less." She turned to one of the healers. "Get him cleaned up. I'll find the king." Before anyone could argue, she was out the door. She found Kyle in the war room, surrounded by maps and grim-faced men. Garen was there. So were half a dozen other commanders she didn't recognize. They all looked up when she barged in. Kale's expression shifted. "Elira, there's a messenger in the infirmary. He says the eastern border is under attack. Warlord Theron, thousands of men." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Questions, curses. Kyle held up a hand and everyone went quiet. "How bad?" he asked. 2 settlements gone. A week, maybe less, before he reaches the fortress. Kale's jaw tightened. He looked at Garen. "Confirm it." Garen nodded and left. Kale turned back to the map, his hands braced on the table, his shoulders tight. One of the commanders, a stocky man with a scarred face, leaned forward. "If Theron's moving this fast, he's not planning to negotiate. He wants blood." "He wants the throne," another said. "He's been building his forces for months. This was always coming." Kyle didn't respond, just stared at the map like he could burn a hole through it. Elira moved closer. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her. His eyes were hard, tired. "What I always do, fight. You can't fight an army that size alone." "I'm not alone." "Kale, I don't have a choice, Elira." His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something raw underneath it. "If I don't stop him, he'll take everything. The fortress, the kingdom, everyone in it." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another way. But she knew better. This was his world. Brutal, unforgiving. And he'd been fighting it his whole life. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. He blinked. "What?" "You're going to war. People are going to get hurt. You'll need healers. I can help." "No." "Kyle, I said no." His tone left no room for argument. "You're staying here, safe. I didn't come here to be safe, and I didn't bring you here to watch you die." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and heavy. Elira's throat tightened. "You don't get to make that choice for me." "Yes, I do." "Why? Because you're the king?" "Because I can't lose you." The room went silent. The commanders were all staring at them. Illyra could feel their eyes, could feel the weight of what Kael had just said. He seemed to realize it too. His expression shifted, closed off. "Everyone out," he said. The commanders hesitated. Then, one by one, they filed out of the room. When the door closed, Kael turned to her. "I meant what I said. I know." "Then why are you fighting me on this?" "Because I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect. I survived 6 years alone in a forest that eats people alive. I pulled poison out of half your court with my bare hands. I can handle myself." "I know you can, but that doesn't mean I want you in the middle of a war. And I don't want you riding into one alone." He stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, "You're the only thing in this place that feels real, Illyra. The only thing that isn't about power or politics or survival. If something happens to you, it won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you." He exhaled slowly, ran a hand through his hair. "You're impossible. So are you." Despite everything, he smiled. Just a little, just enough. "Fine," he said. "You can come, but you stay behind the lines. You don't fight, you heal. That's it. Deal." He looked at her for a moment longer, then he nodded, and just like that, she was going to war. They left 2 days later. The army was massive, over 2,000 men, all of them armed, all of them ready. Illyra had never seen anything like it. The sheer size of it, the noise, the weight of so many bodies moving as one. She rode near the back with the supply wagons and the other healers. There were 6 of them total, 4 women, 2 men, all older than her, all experienced. They didn't talk to her much, just gave her wary looks and kept their distance. She didn't care. She had other things to worry about, like the fact that they were riding toward an army that wanted them all dead. The terrain got rougher the farther east they went. The mountains gave way to rolling hills, then flatlands scarred with old burn marks and broken fences. Signs of previous battles, previous wars. This wasn't new ground. It was contested ground. The kind of place that changed hands every few years, depending on who had the bigger army. Illyra hated it. On the 3rd night, they made camp in a valley between 2 ridges. Fires dotted the landscape. Men sat in clusters, sharpening weapons, checking armor, talking in low voices. Illyra sat apart from them, near one of the medical tents, and tried not to think about what was coming. Kael found her just after dark. He looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes, dirt on his face, tension in every line of his body. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Fine." "Liar." She almost smiled. "I'm terrified." "How's that?" "Honest." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while, they just sat there in silence, watching the fires burn. "I've been doing this my whole life," Kael said quietly. "Fighting, leading men into battles they might not walk away from, and it never gets easier." "Then why do it?" "Because if I don't, someone worse will." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I have to." There was something broken in his voice, something that made her chest ache. "Kael, I killed my father to take this throne," he said. "Did you know that?" She went very still. He was a tyrant, brutal, vicious. He ruled through fear and violence, and he didn't care who he hurt. I watched him destroy people for years, and when I was old enough, strong enough, I challenged him. He stared into the fire. I won, barely, and I've been trying to prove I'm not him ever since. Lara didn't know what to say, didn't know if there was anything to say, so she just reached out and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands. Then, slowly, his fingers closed around hers. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly, "even though I'm terrified. Especially because of that. It means you're smart." She laughed. It came out shaky, but it was real. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands, not talking, just being. And for the first time since they'd left the fortress, Illyra felt like maybe she could survive this. The battle came 2 days later. They saw Theron's army from miles away, a dark mass on the horizon, moving like a living thing. Thousands of men, hundreds of horses, banners snapping in the wind. Kael's forces formed up on a ridge overlooking a wide open field. It was good ground, defensible, but it wouldn't matter if they were outnumbered 3-1. Alira stayed with the healers, setting up the medical tents behind the lines. Her hands shook as she worked, but she forced herself to focus. Bandages, herbs, water, everything they'd need when the wounded started coming. And they would come. She could feel it in the air, the weight of it, the inevitability. Kale rode past on his black warhorse, armor gleaming, sword strapped to his back. He looked like something out of a nightmare, powerful, unstoppable, terrifying. Their eyes met for just a second. Then he was gone, riding to the front lines. Elira's stomach twisted. "First battle?" one of the other healers asked. She nodded. "It's always the worst. After this, you'll know what to expect." "Does that make it easier?" The woman shook her head. "No, but at least you won't be surprised." Before Elira could respond, a horn sounded. Long, low, ominous. The battle had begun. It was chaos. The two armies collided like thunder. Steel on steel, screams, horses shrieking. The ground shook with the impact. Elira couldn't see much from where she was, but she could hear everything, and it was worse than she'd imagined. The first wounded arrived within minutes, a young soldier bleeding from a gash across his chest. Elira grabbed him, dragged him into the tent, and got to work. Hand steady, mind focused. She cleaned the wound, stitched it closed, wrapped it tight. "You'll be fine," she told him. "Go." He stumbled out, and another soldier took his place, then another, then another. It didn't stop. Hours blurred together. Blood, screams, broken bones, burns. She moved from patient to patient, barely stopping to breathe. The other healers worked beside her, just as frantic, just as desperate. People died. She couldn't save them all. A man bled out before she could stitch the artery. A woman's skull was crushed. Nothing she could do. A boy, maybe 15, took a sword to the gut and was gone before she could even touch him. Elira wanted to scream, wanted to break something, but she didn't have time, so she just kept working. The battle lasted all day. By the time the sun started to set, the field was littered with bodies. The screams had faded to groans. The clash of steel had slowed. Elira's hands were covered in blood. Her dress was ruined. Her entire body ached. But they'd won. Barely. Theron's forces had retreated, pulling back toward the east. Kyle's army was too battered to pursue. They held the field, but just barely. Elira stumbled out of the medical tent, looking for Kyle. She found him near the front line, still on his horse, covered in blood and dirt. His sword was in his hand. His chest was heaving, but he was alive. Relief hit her so hard she almost collapsed. He saw her, swung down from his horse, crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, you?" "I'm fine." He looked anything but fine. There was a gash on his arm, another on his leg. His face was pale. "You need a healer," she said. "Later." "Kyle!" He grabbed her, pulled her against him, and held on tight. Elira froze. Then, slowly, she wrapped her arms around him and held on just as tight. They stood like that for a long time, surrounded by blood and bodies and the dying light. And Elira realized something. She loved him. She didn't know when it had happened, didn't know how, but it was there. Undeniable. Terrifying. She loved him, and that scared her more than any battle ever could. That night, Kyle called a council. The commanders gathered in his tent, grim-faced and exhausted. Elira stayed in the corner, out of the way, but Kyle had insisted she be there. "We won today," Garen said, "but barely. We lost over 300 men. Theron lost twice that, but he's got more to spare. If he regroups and hits us again, he will," Kyle said. "That's what he does. He'll pull back, gather reinforcements, and come at us harder." "Then we need reinforcements too," another commander said. "Call in the northern clans. The coastal lords." "They won't come," Kyle said flatly. "Not fast enough. And some of them are waiting to see who wins before they pick a side." The tent went silent. Elira's chest tightened. "So what do you do?" Kale looked at her. "We hold, we fortify, and we pray Theron makes a mistake." "And if he doesn't?" He didn't answer, because they both knew. If Theron didn't make a mistake, they were dead. The next 2 weeks were hell. Theron's forces didn't retreat far. They camped just beyond the ridge, close enough that Khael's army could see their fires at night. Close enough to be a constant threat. Skirmishes broke out almost daily. Small fights, ambushes, testing each other's defenses. More men died. Alyra worked until she couldn't stand, healed until her hands bled, slept in 2-hour bursts and woke up to do it all over again. The fortress sent supplies, reinforcements, but not enough, never enough. And then, one night, everything changed. Alyra was in the medical tent when a soldier burst in. "The king needs you," he said. "Now." Her stomach dropped. "Why? Is he hurt?" "Just come." She followed him to Khael's tent. Inside, Khael was standing over a map, his expression dark. Garen was there. So were 2 men she didn't recognize, scouts by the look of them. Khael looked up when she entered. "Close the door," he said. She did. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Theron's making a move," Khael said. "He's splitting his forces, sending half of them around the south ridge to flank us." Garen swore. "If he gets behind us—" "We're finished," Khael said. "We can't fight on 2 fronts, not with the men we have left." "So what do we do?" one of the scouts asked. Khael was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Alyra. "There's one option," he said, "but it's dangerous." "What?" "I go after Theron directly, challenge him, end this before it gets worse." Her blood went cold. "That's suicide." "It's strategy. Theron's arrogant. He'll accept the challenge, and if I kill him, his army falls apart." "And if you don't kill him?" His jaw tightened. "Then you get as far from here as you can." "No. Alyra, I said no. You're not doing this. I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. You stay here. You fight smart. You don't throw your life away." "I'm not throwing it away. I'm ending a war." "By getting yourself killed." Her voice cracked. The tent went silent. Khael stepped toward her. "This is the only way." "Then find another way." "There isn't one." She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to drag him out of that tent and force him to see how insane this was. But she couldn't, because she knew he was right, and that made it worse. "When?" she asked quietly. "Dawn." She closed her eyes. Khael reached for her, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." And then she left. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on a ridge overlooking the camp and watched the stars and tried to breathe through the panic clawing at her chest. Khael was going to die. She knew it, felt it in her bones, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Unless an idea hit her, dangerous, reckless, probably insane, but it was the only one she had. She stood, brushed the dirt off her dress, and headed back to camp. At dawn, Khael rode out alone. The entire army watched as he crossed the field, sword in hand, heading toward Theron's camp. Alyra watched from the ridge, her heart in her throat. Theron appeared on the opposite side of the field. He was huge, bigger than Khael, covered in scars, carrying a warhammer that looked like it could crush stone. The 2 men met in the center. Words were exchanged. Alyra couldn't hear them, but she saw Khael draw his sword, saw Theron raise his hammer, and then they fought. It was brutal, fast. Khael moved like a wolf, quick, precise, lethal. But Theron was a mountain. Every swing of his hammer shook the ground. Alyra couldn't breathe. Khael landed a hit. Theron staggered, but then the hammer came down, and Khael barely dodged. The fight went on. Minutes felt like hours. And then Theron made a mistake. He overextended, left his side open. Khael didn't hesitate. His sword drove straight through Theron's ribs. The warlord dropped. The field erupted in cheers. Alyra's knees went weak with relief. It was over. Khael had won. But the relief didn't last. That night, as the army celebrated, Alyra was in the medical tent when Garen found her. "The king wants to see you," he said. She followed him to Khael's tent. Inside, Kale was sitting on the edge of his cot, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Alira's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" He looked up at her, and she saw it. The wound on his side, small, almost invisible, poisoned. "No," she whispered. "Theron's blade," Kale said quietly. It was coated. Her hands were shaking. "How long?" "Hours, maybe less." She crossed the tent, dropped to her knees beside him, and pressed her hand to the wound. Heat, poison, spreading fast. She could fix this. She could pull it out. She'd done it before. But this was different. This was worse. "Alira," Kyle said. His hand covered hers. "If you can't—" "Shut up," she said. "I can. I will." And she got to work. The poison was alive. That was the only way Alira could describe it. It didn't just sit in Kyle's blood like a foreign substance waiting to be filtered out. It moved, crawled, spread through his veins like something with intent, like something that wanted him dead and knew exactly how to do it. She'd seen poisons before, treated them, pulled them out of people who should have died but didn't because she got to them fast enough. This was different. This was designed to kill a king. Her hands pressed flat against the wound on his side, and she closed her eyes. Let herself sink into that strange, indefinable space where her gift lived, where she could feel the shape of damage inside a body, map it like terrain, trace the pathways of infection and injury. The poison burned. Not hot, cold, ice cold, spreading through him in jagged threads, reaching for his heart, his lungs, his brain, shutting down everything vital piece by piece. She had minutes, maybe less. "Alira," Kale's voice was rough, strained. "If you can't do this, I told you to shut up." His hand found hers, squeezed. "I mean it. If this is too much, it's not." She opened her eyes, met his gaze. "Trust me." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then slowly, he nodded. She turned to Garen, who stood frozen near the tent entrance, his face pale. "I need yarrow, golden seal, white willow bark, and monk's hood. Just a pinch, no more. Now." He didn't move. "Garen!" That snapped him out of it. He turned and bolted. Alira looked back at Kyle. His breathing was getting shallower. His skin had gone gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead. She didn't have time to wait for the herbs, so she did what she always did when there was no other choice. She pulled. It was worse than the infection back in her cabin, worse than anything she'd done before. The poison resisted, fought back, dug its claws into Kyle's veins, and refused to let go. Pain exploded through her chest. Her vision blurred. Her hand shook. But she didn't stop. She wrapped her will around the poison, dragged it toward her, forced it out of him and into herself. It burned like acid, like ice, like nothing she'd ever felt. Her breath came in short, desperate gasps. Her heart hammered. Every muscle in her body screamed, but the poison was moving, slowly, agonizingly slowly. It left him, thread by thread, piece by piece, and sank into her. Alira's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the cot, teeth gritted, fighting the wave of nausea that slammed into her. Kale's breathing evened out. The gray faded from his skin. His eyes focused. "Alira," she held up a hand. "Not yet." The poison sat inside her now, writhing, trying to spread, but her body knew what to do with it, had done this before. She just had to hold on long enough for it to break down. Garen burst back into the tent, arms full of jars and pouches. "Here!" Alira grabbed the monk's hood, measured out a pinch with shaking fingers, and mixed it with water. Drank it in one swallow. It tasted like death, but it would help. Monk's hood, in the right dose, could neutralize certain poisons. In the wrong dose, it killed you faster. She'd just have to hope she got it right. The tent spun. She gripped the cot to keep from falling. Kyle sat up, too fast she could see the pain flash across his face, and caught her by the shoulders. "What did you do?" "My job." "Alira?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're shaking." "I said I'm fine." But her voice came out weak, thin, and she hated it. Kyle pulled her onto the cot beside him, one arm around her shoulders, holding her upright. "You pulled it out," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" You pulled it into yourself. She didn't answer, didn't need to. You could have died. So could you. That's different. How? Because I'm the one who's supposed to protect you. She laughed. It came out bitter. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? She looked at him, really looked at him. His face was still too pale, his jaw still too tight, but his eyes were clear, alive. We protect each other, she said, or we don't do this at all. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. She let her head drop onto his shoulder. Exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The poison was breaking down inside her. She could feel it losing its grip, dissolving into something her body could process. But it was taking everything she had left. You need to rest, Kael said. So do you. I will, after you. Stubborn. Look who's talking. Despite everything, she smiled, and then finally, she let herself close her eyes. She woke to voices, low, urgent, arguing. Illyra blinked, trying to orient herself. She was still in Kael's tent, still on the cot, but he wasn't beside her anymore. He was standing near the entrance, fully dressed, sword strapped to his back. Garen was with him. So were two other commanders. Can't be serious, Garen was saying. You almost died last night, and I didn't, Kael said. Theron's army is falling apart. If we move now, we can end this. You need time to recover. I've recovered enough. My king, Garen. Kael's voice went cold. I'm not asking. The tent went silent. Illyra sat up slowly. Every muscle in her body ached. The poison was gone, but it had left her wrung out. Hollow. Kael noticed her. His expression softened. You're awake. What's going on? We're moving on Theron's camp. His commanders are trying to regroup, but they're scattered. If we hit them now, you'll finish what he started, she said. And if you push too hard, you'll tear yourself apart. I'm fine. You're not. Neither of us are. He crossed the tent, crouched in front of her. I know, but this is the moment, Illyra. If I wait, they'll rally. They'll come back stronger. I can't let that happen. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being reckless, but she could see it in his eyes, the determination, the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down on him. He wasn't going to back down. How long? She asked. 2 days, 3 at most. And then it's over. We go home. Home. The word hit her harder than she expected, because the fortress had started to feel like home, and she hadn't even noticed. Okay, she said. Go. But you take Garen with you, and you don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Challenging anyone else to single combat. He almost smiled. Deal. She reached out, grabbed his hand. Come back alive. Always. And then he was gone. The camp felt empty after Kael left. Most of the army had gone with him, over 1,000 men, all the strongest fighters, leaving only a skeleton force behind to guard the wounded and the supplies. Illyra threw herself into work. There were still patients who needed care, wounds that needed tending, men who were fighting infections or fevers or injuries that wouldn't heal right. She moved through the medical tent like a ghost, hands steady, mind numb. The other healers watched her differently now. Before, they'd kept their distance, treated her like an outsider. Now, they asked her questions, deferred to her. One of them, an older woman named Mara, even smiled at her. You saved the king, Mara said quietly. Twice now. People are talking. Illyra didn't look up from the bandage she was wrapping. Let them talk. They're saying you're more than just a healer. I'm not. They're saying the king loves you. Illyra's hands stilled. Mara was watching her, her expression unreadable. Is it true? Illyra didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know if it was true. Didn't know if it mattered. I don't know, she said finally. Mara nodded. Fair enough. She didn't bring it up again. But the question sat in Alira's chest like a weight she couldn't shake. The days dragged. Each one felt longer than the last. Alira kept busy. There was always something that needed doing, someone who needed help. But her mind was elsewhere, out there on the battlefield with Kael, wondering if he was safe, if he was hurt, if she'd ever see him again. She hated feeling this way, hated the dependence, the vulnerability. But she couldn't shut it off. On the second night, one of the soldiers she'd treated, a young man named Darren, with a badly broken arm, came to find her. "Miss Vance," he said, "can I ask you something?" She was mixing a salve, her hands moving automatically. "What is it?" "Why'd you come here? To the war, I mean. You could have stayed safe at the fortress." She paused, looked at him. He was barely older than 20, with a thin face and earnest eyes. "Same reason you did," she said. "Someone needed help. But you're a healer, not a soldier." "Doesn't matter. People were going to die either way. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing." Darren nodded slowly. "My sister's a healer, back in our village. She always says the same thing, that she can't turn away from someone who's suffering." He looked down at his arm, still splinted and wrapped. "I used to think that was weakness, but watching you work these past few days, I don't think that anymore." Alira's throat tightened. "Your sister sounds smart." "She is, smarter than me anyway." He smiled. "Thank you for fixing my arm, for being here." "You're welcome." After he left, Alira sat alone in the tent and let herself feel the weight of it all. The exhaustion, the fear, the strange, unexpected gratitude from people she barely knew. She'd spent so long being the outsider, the one people feared or avoided or drove away. Being needed was different. It was terrifying. But it was also something else. Something that felt almost like belonging. Bassam. Kael came back 3 days later, victorious. Alira was in the medical tent when the horn sounded, long, triumphant, echoing across the valley. Her heart leapt. She dropped the supplies she was holding and ran. The army was streaming back into camp, tired but alive. Banners flying, men cheering. The air felt lighter, electric. They'd won. Alira pushed through the crowd, scanning faces, looking for him. And then she saw him. He was still on his horse, covered in dirt and blood, but whole, alive. His eyes found hers across the distance, and something in her chest cracked wide open. He swung down from the saddle and crossed the space between them in long strides. "You're alive," she said. "So are you." And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and fierce and everything she'd been too afraid to let herself feel. She kissed him back just as hard. The camp erupted in cheers. When they finally pulled apart, Alira was breathless. "That was long overdue," Kael said. She laughed. "Yeah, it was." He smiled, really smiled. The kind of smile that made him look younger, less burdened. And for the first time since she'd met him, Alira thought maybe they could actually survive this. Garen appeared beside them, looking exhausted but pleased. "My king, we've secured the supply lines. Theron's remaining commanders have surrendered." Kael nodded, but his gaze didn't leave Alira. "Good. We leave for the fortress at dawn." "And the prisoners?" "Bring them. We'll deal with them when we get back." Garen hesitated. "My king, there's one more thing. The Southern Lords, they sent word. They want to meet with you, discuss terms. They can wait. They're insisting, Garen." Kael's voice was firm. "They can wait." Garen bowed his head. "As you say." He walked away, leaving them alone in the midst of the chaos. Kael turned back to Alira. "Are you all right?" "I should be asking you that." "I'm fine, better now." She reached up, touched his face. There was a new cut along his jawline, dried blood at his temple. "You're a terrible liar." "I learned from the best." She smiled despite herself. "Come on, let me clean you up before you bleed all over everything." He let her lead him to the medical tent. The other healers gave them space, suddenly very interested in organizing supplies or checking on patients at the far end. Alira pulled Kael down onto a stool, grabbed a clean cloth and water, and started cleaning the cut on his face. "This is going to sting," she said. "I've had worse." "I know, doesn't mean you have to enjoy it." He caught her wrist gently. "Elira." She looked at him. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for staying, for everything." Her chest ached. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She set the cloth aside, cupped his face in her hands. "We're past that now. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you. We're just here, together." He pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers. "Together." "Yeah." They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, holding on. Outside, the celebration continued, but in that tent, it was just the two of them. And that was enough. They made it back to the fortress a week later. The return was different from the departure. People lined the roads, cheered, threw flowers, celebrated. Elira rode beside Kael, and for once the stairs didn't feel hostile. They felt curious, respectful even. It was strange. When they reached the gates, the entire court was waiting. Advisors, nobles, servants, all of them watching as Kael dismounted and helped Elira down from her horse. He didn't let go of her hand, and everyone noticed. A tall, thin man stepped forward, one of the senior advisors by the look of him. "My king, we're relieved to see you safe." "Thank you, Lord Tyrell." Tyrell's gaze flicked to Elira. "And your companion?" "Elira Vance," Kael said. His voice carried across the courtyard. "The woman who saved my life, twice. The woman who helped us win this war." Silence. Then, slowly, Tyrell bowed. One by one, the rest of the court followed. Elira's throat tightened. She'd gone from outcast to enemy to this. It didn't feel real. Kael squeezed her hand. "Come on, let's get you inside." That night there was a feast. The great hall was packed, tables overflowing with food, wine flowing, music playing, everyone celebrating the victory. Elira sat beside Kael at the head table, feeling out of place in a dress someone had insisted she wear, deep blue, finer than anything she'd ever owned. Kael leaned over. "You look uncomfortable." "I am." "Want to leave?" "Can we do that?" "I'm the king. I can do whatever I want." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a dangerous attitude." And yet, he stood, offered her his hand. She took it. They slipped out of the hall together, leaving the celebration behind. Kael led her through the fortress, up staircases and down corridors, until they reached the battlements. The night air was cold, clear. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. Elira leaned against the stone wall, looking out at the mountains. "It's beautiful up here," she said. "It is." She glanced at him. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. "What?" "I meant what I said earlier," he said quietly. "You saved me, more than once, and not just from poison or wounds. You saved me from becoming the kind of king I swore I'd never be." Her chest tightened. "Kael, I'm serious. Before you, I was just surviving, fighting, holding on. But you made me remember why I wanted this throne in the first place, why I thought I could be better than my father." She didn't know what to say, didn't trust her voice, so she just stepped closer and kissed him. This time, it was slow, gentle, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said, "not as a guest, not as a healer. Stay because you want to, because this is where you belong." Elira's throat ached. "I don't know if I belong anywhere. You belong here. With me." She closed her eyes, let herself feel it, the weight of the words, the truth of them. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." He smiled, kissed her again, and for the first time in her life, Elira felt like she'd found something worth holding on to. The next few weeks passed in a strange blur of normalcy and chaos. Kael threw himself into rebuilding, reinforcing the borders, negotiating with the northern clans, securing alliances. He was up before dawn and didn't stop until long after dark. Alira worked alongside the healers, training them, teaching them techniques they'd never seen before. She set up a proper infirmary, organized supply lines, made sure no one else would die from something preventable. People started coming to her, not just for healing, for advice, for help. A servant whose daughter was sick, a guard whose wife was in labor, a noble whose elderly father couldn't keep food down. She helped them all. And slowly, the court started to accept her. Not all of them. There were still whispers, still people who looked at her like she didn't belong. But more and more, those voices were drowned out by others, by the soldiers who'd watched her save their king, by the servants who'd seen her work through the night to heal the sick, by the people who realized she wasn't a threat. She was an asset. One morning, Mara found her in the infirmary. "There's someone here to see you," she said. Alira looked up from the salve she was mixing. "Who?" "Lady Ashlyn, one of the senior nobles." Alira's stomach tightened. She'd seen Lady Ashlyn around the fortress. A severe-looking woman in her 50s, always dressed in black, always watching. She had the kind of presence that made people nervous. "What does she want?" "She didn't say, just asked for you." Alira wiped her hands on a cloth and followed Mara to the sitting room. Lady Ashlyn was waiting, standing by the window, her hands clasped in front of her. "Miss Vance?" she said. Her voice was cool, controlled. "Lady Ashlyn, I wanted to speak with you, privately." Mara glanced at Alira, who nodded. The older healer slipped out, closing the door behind her. Alira waited. Lady Ashlyn turned to face her. "I owe you an apology." Alira blinked. "What?" "When you first arrived, I thought you were a distraction, a liability. I thought the king had made a mistake bringing you here." She paused. "I was wrong." Alira didn't know what to say. "You saved him," Lady Ashlyn continued. "You saved this kingdom, and you did it without asking for anything in return. That's rare, especially here. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, that's why it matters." Lady Ashlyn stepped closer. "The court is changing, Miss Vance, slowly, but it's changing, and you're part of that, whether you intended to be or not." Alira swallowed hard. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time. None of us do, but you're doing it anyway, and that takes courage." For the first time, Lady Ashlyn smiled. It was small, brief, but real. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." And then she was gone. Alira stood alone in the room, her chest tight, and realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, Cale found her in the library. She was reading by candlelight, curled up in a chair near the fireplace. "You're hard to track down," he said. She looked up. "I needed quiet." "Mind if I ruin it?" She smiled. "Depends. What do you want?" He crossed the room, sat down across from her. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then, "I need to ask you something." Her stomach flipped. "Okay." "The court is stabilizing. The borders are secure. We've got alliances in place. Things are good, better than they've been in years. That's great." "It is, but there's still one thing missing." She frowned. "What?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small wooden box, and set it on the table between them. Alira's breath caught. "Cale, I know this is fast," he said. "I know we've only known each other a few months, but I also know I've never felt this way about anyone, and I don't want to waste time pretending I don't." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, a single dark stone set in the band. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before she died. Told me to give it to someone who made me feel like the world was worth fighting for." Alira's eyes burned. "You don't have to answer now," Cale said. "But I need you to know. I want you beside me. Not just as a healer, not just as someone I care about. I want you as my queen." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "You're serious," she whispered. "Completely. Cale, I'm nobody. An outcast. You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said. And if you think being an outcast disqualifies you, then you don't know this kingdom as well as you think. Half the people who served me came from nothing. They earned their place, just like you did." She stared at the ring, at him, at the impossible choice he was asking her to make. And then she thought about everything that had brought her here. The cabin, the storm, the choice to save a dying stranger. Every moment since had led to this. "Yes," she said. Kael's eyes widened. "Yes? Yes. I'll marry you. I'll be your queen. I'll do whatever it takes." He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, pulled her out of the chair, and kissed her so hard she forgot how to breathe. When they finally pulled apart, they were both laughing. "You're sure?" he asked. Terrified. "But sure." "Good, because there's no taking it back now." She smiled. "I wouldn't want to." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And just like that, the outcast became a queen. The announcement came the next morning. Kael made it himself, standing in the great hall with Illyra beside him, her hand in his. The court erupted. Some cheered. Some looked shocked. A few looked angry, but no one dared challenge him. Not after everything that had happened. Not after she'd proven herself. Illyra stood there, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on her, and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She'd faced worse than this. And she'd survived. Whatever came next, she could handle it, because she wasn't alone anymore. She had Kael, and she had herself, and that was more than enough. The first snow came early that year. Illyra woke to find the fortress blanketed in white, the mountains beyond wrapped in clouds that looked like they'd been painted on. She stood at the window of the room she now shared with Kael, watching the flakes fall, and tried to process everything that had changed in the past few months. She was engaged to a king. She was going to be queen. She was going to marry the man who'd stumbled into her cabin half dead and turned her entire world upside down. It still didn't feel real. Behind her, Kael stirred. She heard the rustle of blankets, the creak of the bed. "You're up early," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Couldn't sleep." "Nervous?" She glanced back at him. He was propped up on one elbow, watching her with those dark, steady eyes. "Maybe a little." "About the wedding?" "About everything." He sat up, pushed the blankets aside, and crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "We don't have to do this fast," he said. "If you need more time, it's not that." She leaned back against him. "It's just 6 months ago, I was alone in a forest. Nobody wanted me. Nobody even knew I existed. And now I'm here, about to become queen of a kingdom I barely understand, surrounded by people who still aren't sure what to make of me. They'll come around. Some of them, not all. The ones who matter already have." She turned in his arms to face him. "And what about the ones who haven't? What happens when they decide I'm a threat? When they start working against us?" "Then we deal with it. Together." She wanted to believe it was that simple. But she'd lived too long in a world where nothing was simple. Where being different meant being dangerous. Where people turned on you the second they got scared. "What if I'm not strong enough for this?" she asked quietly. Kael's expression softened. He cupped her face in his hands. "You pulled poison out of my body with your bare hands. You saved half this fortress from a plague. You walked into a war zone and came out the other side. You're the strongest person I know, Illyra. And if you can't see that, then I'll just have to keep reminding you until you do." Her throat tightened. "You're annoyingly optimistic sometimes. And you're annoyingly stubborn. We balance each other out." Despite everything, she smiled. He kissed her, soft, gentle, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. When he pulled back, he was smiling too. "Come on. We've got a long day ahead." "Doing what?" "Meeting with the council. They want to discuss the wedding." She groaned. "Already?" "They've been asking for weeks. I can't put them off forever." "You're the king. You can do whatever you want." "That's what I keep telling them. They don't seem to believe me." She laughed despite herself. "Fine. But if Lord Tyrell starts talking about lineages again, I'm leaving. Deal." Yatent. The council meeting was exactly as insufferable as Illyra had expected. She sat beside Kael at the long table, surrounded by advisors and nobles, all of them talking over each other about traditions and ceremonies and bloodlines. Lord Tyrell was in rare form, droning on about the importance of maintaining proper customs, how a royal wedding needed to reflect the strength of the kingdom, how certain protocols had been in place for generations and couldn't simply be ignored. Illyra tuned him out. She'd gotten good at that over the past few weeks, letting the noise wash over her while she focused on more important things, like the fact that Lady Ashlyn kept glancing at her with what looked almost like approval, or the way Garen kept shifting in his seat like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. And, of course, the question of heirs, Tyrell was saying. That got her attention. She looked up. "Excuse me?" Tyrell blinked at her like he'd forgotten she was there. "Heirs, Miss Vance, the succession. It's customary to discuss such matters before the wedding to ensure..." To ensure what? Her voice was sharper than she'd intended. "That the bloodline remains strong, that any children born to the union are what? Pure enough for you?" The room went silent. Tyrell's face went red. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." Illyra stood. "You're worried that my blood isn't good enough, that I'm going to taint the precious royal line with my common, outcast heritage. Miss Vance, it's all right, Tyrell. You can say it. I've heard worse." Kael's hand found hers under the table. Squeezed. She took a breath, forced herself to stay calm. "I know what I am," she said quietly. "I know where I come from. And I know that half the people in this room think I don't belong here. But I'm not going anywhere. So you can either accept that, or you can spend the rest of your lives bitter and angry about something you can't change." Tyrell opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Kael. Kael's expression was cold. "Is there anything else you'd like to say, Lord Tyrell?" "No, my king." "Good. Then we're done here." The advisors filed out, murmuring amongst themselves. When the door closed, Illyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I shouldn't have said that," she muttered. "Yes, you should have." Kael was grinning. "That was the most entertainment I've had in a council meeting in years. It's not funny. It's a little funny." She shook her head, but she was smiling too. Garen had stayed behind. He cleared his throat. "My king, a word?" Kael nodded. "What is it?" "There's been word from the eastern border. Scouts are reporting movement. Armed groups, small but organized." Kael's expression shifted. "Theron's remnants?" "Possibly, or opportunists. Either way, they're testing our defenses." "How many?" 50, maybe more." Kael stood. "Double the patrols. I want eyes on every pass and ridge. If they're planning something, we'll know before they move," Garen finished. "Understood." He left. Illyra looked at Kael. "You think it's serious?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking chances." "Do you need me to?" "No." His tone was firm. "You're staying here, safe." "Kael..." "Illyra, please, just this once, don't argue with me." She wanted to, but the look on his face stopped her. "Okay," she said. "But if it gets bad..." "If it gets bad, I'll send for you. I promise." She nodded, but the unease sat heavy in her chest. The attack started 2 weeks later. Small raids on outlying settlements. Supply wagons ambushed. Guards killed. Kyle sent more men to the border, fortified the passes. But the attacks kept coming. Hit-and-run tactics. Fast. Brutal. Impossible to predict. The fortress was on edge. Illyra spent her days in the infirmary treating the wounded who made it back. Burns. Arrow wounds. Broken bones. The injuries were getting worse. Someone was coordinating these attacks. Someone who knew what they were doing. One night, Kael came back covered in blood. Not his own. He was quick to tell her that. But there'd been an ambush. 3 of his men were dead. 6 more wounded. Illyra cleaned him up in silence, her hands steady even though her mind was racing. "It's not random," she said finally. "I know. Someone's organizing them. Someone with resources. I know." "Who?" He didn't answer. She set the cloth down. Kael, who do you think it is? He looked at her, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight. I think Theron had allies, he said quietly. Powerful ones, and I think they're not happy that I killed him. Her stomach dropped. You think they're coming for you. I think they're testing me, seeing how far they can push before I break. And I'm not going to break. But she could see the cracks, could see the way this was wearing him down. Let me help, she said. You are helping. No, I mean really help. Let me go to the border. Let me... No. Kael, I said no, Illyra. I can't lose you. Not to this. And I can't just sit here while you... This is my fight. It's our fight, whether you like it or not. He stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, I'm scared. She blinked. She'd never heard him say that before. Of what? Of failing. Of losing this kingdom. Of losing you. He ran a hand through his hair. I've been fighting my whole life, Illyra, and I'm tired, and I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Her heart broke for him. She stepped closer, took his face in her hands. You don't have to do it alone. That's the whole point. You have people. You have me. Let us help carry this. His eyes closed. I don't know how. Then learn. He pulled her into his arms and held on tight. And for the first time since the attack started, Illyra felt like maybe they could survive this. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the captured raiders, a young man barely out of his teens, broke under questioning, told them everything. The attacks were being funded by Lord Varen, a nobleman from the Southern Territories, a man who'd been loyal to Theron, a man who wanted revenge. And he wasn't working alone. According to the raider, Varen had allied with 2 other lords. Together, they'd amassed a small army, and they were planning something big. Kael called an emergency council. The advisors argued for hours. Some wanted to negotiate, some wanted to fortify and wait. Some wanted to march south and crush the rebellion before it got worse. Kael listened to all of them, and then he made his decision. We're going south, he said. We're going to find Varen, and we're going to end this. Garen nodded. I'll prepare the men. And I'm coming with you, Illyra said. Every head in the room turned to look at her. Kael's jaw tightened. Illyra, don't. She stood. You said we're in this together, so let me prove it. You need healers. You need someone who can keep your men alive when things go wrong. And you know I can do that better than anyone. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous. That doesn't mean I'm going to hide. Lord Tyrell cleared his throat. My king, perhaps Miss Vance has a point. If the men know she's there fighting alongside them, it could boost morale, Lady Ashlyn said. Show them that you're united, that she's not just a figurehead. Kael looked around the table, then back at Illyra. You stay behind the lines, he said finally. You heal. You don't fight. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Deal. He shook his head. You're going to be the death of me. Not if I can help it. They marched south 3 days later. The army was smaller this time, 800 men, fast, mobile, designed to strike hard and get out. Illyra rode with the healers again, but this time it felt different. This time she wasn't just along for the ride. She was part of it. The men nodded to her as she passed, smiled, some even saluted. It was strange, but in a good way. They reached the Southern Territories after 5 days of hard riding. The land here was different, flatter, drier, dotted with small villages and sprawling estates. And somewhere out there, Varen was waiting. Kael sent scouts ahead. They came back 2 days later with intel. Varen's forces were camped in a valley 10 miles south. 600 men, well-armed, well-supplied. It was going to be a fight. Kael gathered his commanders that night. We hit them at dawn, he said, fast and hard. We take out Varen and his lieutenants. The rest will scatter. And if they don't, Garen asked, then we deal with them one at a time. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. Illyra found Kael after the meeting, sitting alone by the fire. She sat down beside him, didn't say anything, just sat. After a while, he spoke. I wish you weren't here. I know. But I'm glad you are. I know that too. He looked at her. If something happens to me, it won't. If it does, Kael, stop. He took her hand. Promise me something. What? Promise me you'll keep going, no matter what. You'll keep building what we started. You'll keep fighting. Her throat tightened. You're coming back. Promise me, Alira. She looked into his eyes, saw the fear there, the love. I promise, she whispered. He kissed her, long, deep, like it might be the last time, and then he pulled away and walked into the darkness. Alira sat by the fire alone and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring. The battle was chaos. Kael's forces hit Varen's camp at first light, slamming into them before they were fully awake. Steel clashed. Men screamed. Blood soaked the ground. Alira worked from the medical tent, hands moving automatically, stitching wounds, stopping bleeding, pulling arrows. The wounded kept coming. A soldier with a gash across his chest, another with a broken leg, a third with an arrow through his shoulder. She saved as many as she could, but some were beyond saving. She tried not to think about that, tried to focus on the ones she could help. Hours blurred together. And then, suddenly, it was over. The sounds of fighting faded. The screams stopped. Alira stumbled out of the tent, covered in blood, and looked around. Kael's men were standing in the ruins of the camp, battered, exhausted, but victorious. Varen was dead. So were his lieutenants. The rebellion was over. Alira's knees went weak with relief. She scanned the crowd looking for Kael, and then she saw him. He was standing in the center of the camp, sword in hand, staring down at something on the ground. She moved closer. It was Varen's body. Kael looked up as she approached. His face was spattered with blood, his expression unreadable. It's done, he said quietly. Yeah, I killed him, just like I killed Theron, just like I've killed everyone who's ever threatened this kingdom. There was something broken in his voice. Alira reached for him. Kael, how many more? He asked. How many more people have to die before this stops? I don't know. I'm tired, Alira. I'm so tired. She pulled him into her arms and held on tight. I know, but you're not alone, not anymore. He buried his face in her shoulder and let himself break, just for a moment, and then he pulled himself together, straightened, and turned to face his men. We ride for the fortress, he said. It's time to go home. They made it back 2 weeks later. The fortress was waiting, and this time the celebration was different. There were no grand feasts, no speeches, just quiet relief, exhausted gratitude. Kael addressed the court that night. The rebellion is over, he said. Varen is dead. His allies are scattered. The southern territories are secure. Cheers. But they were tired cheers. But this fight cost us, Kael continued. We lost good men. We lost friends. We lost too much. The hall went quiet. So I'm making a change, Kael said. No more wars, no more campaigns. We're done expanding. We're done fighting. From now on, we focus on building, on healing, on making this kingdom a place worth living in. Murmurs, some confused, some relieved. And to help with that, Kael said, I'm making Alira Vance my queen, not just in title, in practice. She'll oversee the healers, the infirmaries, the supply lines. She'll make sure no one in this kingdom dies from something preventable. He looked at her. If she'll have me. Alira's heart pounded. Every eye in the hall was on her. She stood, crossed to him, took his hand. Yes, she said. I'll have you. The hall erupted, and this time the cheers were real. They were married 2 months later. The ceremony was small, intimate, just the people who mattered. Alira wore a simple dress, white, with silver embroidery. Kael wore his armor, polished until it gleamed. They stood in the great hall, surrounded by candles, and made their vows. To protect each other, to fight for each other, to never give up. When Kael kissed her, The hall erupted in applause. And Alira realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the outcast, the witch, the woman no one wanted. She was the queen, and she'd earned it. But spring came early that year. The snow melted, the trees bloomed. The fortress came alive with color and warmth. Alira stood in the infirmary she'd built, watching her healers work. They moved with confidence now, purpose. They were saving lives. She felt a hand on her shoulder, turned. Kael was standing behind her, smiling. "Come with me," he said. "There's something I want to show you." She followed him through the fortress, out onto the battlements. The view stretched for miles, mountains, forests, villages dotting the landscape. "It's beautiful," she said. "It is, and it's ours." She looked at him. "Ours? We built this, Alira. You and me. We took something broken and made it whole." Her chest tightened. "And there's something else," Kael said quietly. "What?" He took her hand, placed it on her stomach. Her breath caught. "I know," he said. "The healer confirmed it this morning. You're pregnant." Alira's world tilted. Pregnant, she was going to have a child. Kael's child. An heir. "Are you okay?" Kael asked. She looked at him, at the man who'd stumbled into her cabin half dead, the man who'd turned her world upside down, the man she'd chosen to fight for. And she smiled. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay. Better than okay." He kissed her, long and deep, and when they pulled apart, Alira looked out at the kingdom spread before them and realized something. She'd gone from being the woman no one wanted to the woman who'd changed everything. She'd gone from outcast to queen, and she'd done it on her own terms. The world was still harsh, still brutal, still unforgiving, but she'd survived it, and she'd built something that would last, a new order, a new way of living, a kingdom where healers mattered as much as warriors, where compassion was strength, not weakness, where being different wasn't a curse, it was a gift. Kael wrapped his arm around her, and together they looked out at their kingdom, at the future they were building, at the life growing inside her. And Alira Vance, the outcast, the healer, the queen, smiled, because she was exactly where she was supposed to be, and nothing would ever change that. Years later, when people told the story of the Wolf King and his queen, they spoke of courage, of survival, of a love forged in blood and fire. But they also spoke of something else, of a woman who refused to bow, who walked into a world that didn't want her and made it hers anyway, who proved that strength came in many forms, and who changed a kingdom forever. Alira's daughter would grow up hearing those stories, would grow up knowing that her mother had been an outcast who became a queen, that her father had been a warrior who learned to build instead of destroy, and she would carry that legacy forward, into a future that was brighter than the past, into a world where healing mattered, where compassion was power, where love was the strongest force of all, and it all started with a choice, made on a storm-ravaged night, by a woman who refused to let a stranger die. That choice changed everything, and it always would.